Hello and welcome to another Sunday Superversive live stream. I am your host, Benjamin Wheeler, and I'm here with Anthony Marchetta, and I must apologize. We are sadly unavailable with the Joel Osteen board game. We should have it next week, God willing. And as I
That's the
name it
goal.
and claim it in the spirit, we will have it. That's how it works, right, Anthony?
Something like that.
Right, right. So the main sub now that the how are you today, Anthony? I almost neglected to say how are you?
I'm having a fantastic day. Bradford Walker says, "Hey folks, hey Bradford."
Hey, hey. Excellent. So here's what we're talking about today. Basically, there like the decline of America is a huge and absolutely ginormous subject, partially because everyone's talking to each other and everyone has a different opinion. And we will, of course, skirt the devastation and of the AI finding us, our AI overlords, praise the overlord, um, and make sure that, you know, nothing embarrassing comes out. However, the decline of America, the subject I want to talk to about today is opportunities. I believe you saw something over at the John C. Wright blog about that you were telling me about.
Just conversations that they're having there. I don't like calling people out specifically, especially because most of these people I agree with on most things, and also it seems unsporting since they're not here to defend themselves. But in a more general way, uh, I feel like there is this weird disconnect, a contradiction that I always hear pop up. And I don't think they realize it's a contradiction, and I'm sure that some of these very smart people can argue very credibly why it is in fact not a contradiction. But when you say it out loud, it sure sounds like one. And the contradiction is America is right now in a terminal decline to the point where only a miracle of God can save us. And put right next to that the current generation of working individuals, the millennial generation, has nothing to really to complain about. Life is actually great, and they're whiners, and their biggest issue is that they don't work very hard. This is very strange to me because this seems to me like there is just a straight contradiction between the two. One of three things needs to be true. One of the things is America isn't actually in a decline. You don't need that. America's really doing great. Well, I suppose you could say one of four things, but I'll get to that in a moment. One, America's not actually in a decline. You don't mean that. We're doing great. So you don't think that. So the second thing that needs to be true is then that that millennials are just really are actually doing very well and there's no issue. But you don't mean that either because you think that America's in a decline and we're on the downswing. So clearly that's not the case. Now, another thing you could mean is that America dying is a good thing and this is better for the world, so that's why they're doing okay. And the fourth issue is that you think that it's the millennials and their lack of hard work that is the cause of this decline, but I doubt that anybody would actually say this because it falls apart immediately upon thinking of it. I mean, if are you saying that the decline only happened in the 4 months since the election of Donald Trump and now? Or that it only started when millennials came of age, that before that there were no real issues? I don't think anybody actually thinks that. I'm pretty sure none of the people who I'm talking about and who have made these sorts of arguments would admit that. So, what exactly are you trying to say? Because frankly, it looks to me like you're really committed to one of two things. You either don't think America is in decline, you think we're doing fine, you think that there is no issue and that the issue is in the heads of the lazy millennials, or you don't think that the issues are really the fault of the millennials. Like, it's just so weird to me. It seems like such an obvious contradiction to me, and people say it all the time. It drives me nuts. What do you think, Ben?
What do I think? I think a lot of people blame the millennials for things because it brings a catharsis. But I'm going to actually argue in agreement and counterpoint to you that we are headed for sort of an American dark age, kind of like the social wars in. Let me make sure I'm using social wars right, but the social wars in Rome, which, if I recall correctly, ended with Sulla and his prescriptions and a whole bunch of other things. Basically, no wait, I'm
So you're
sorry.
referring to that era of Rome?
Yeah, basically it was Rome against their Italian citizens. So I'm only kind of wrong. That I'll take it. Uh, but it led into excuse me. It led into guys like Sola and Marius and Cato and stuff like that, really sort of taking over, and the Populares and the Optimates and all this other stuff. For some reason, I don't ever hear about the social war in like my meme Rome videos, and so I completely messed up the ball there. But like it was a civil war in a greater geopolitical area centered around Italy, which is what I believe that we're headed. Oh my goodness, that burnout! Which is what I believe that we're headed into. Um, as much as I want, Missouri to form an empire and rule coast to coast with an iron fist, a methed up fist, if you will, that's not going to happen. Instead, what I believe that we're seeing is we're in the middle of an immense cultural decline. And anyone could tell you this who's been listening to any sort of edgy right wing live streamer for years. Arini was talking about it, Sargon talked about it, Ben Shapiro has talked about it, even though he has no conception, even though he's trying to ride that wave profitably, if you get me. Um, but the thing is that that's not what's going to happen. You know, sure, scum are gonna. And I'm not saying that Sargon and Arini are scum, specifically Sargon and Arini. Scum, will rise to the top and all that jazz. But what's going to happen is that, there will be a decline in the cultural attitudes and mores and spirit of America that we are already in the thing. I believe that historians will look back and they're going to call this period from September 11th to whenever it ends the crisis of the 21st century. Partially because it is a worldwide crisis, and partially because it's a crisis of the American empire, which we are, in the homeland of. I'm sort of in the same position as Hispania. No barbarian tribes are going to kick down my doors, unless they've been let in by the Roman powers that be. Um, but hey, you hear what goes on in my neighborhood. Uh, the real thing that gets me is that people don't seem to want to think about it, and they don't want to talk about it. I talked about a guy who was making a choice about what he injects into his body, if you get me. And I said, well, listen, you really shouldn't do this. It's an RNA injection. It changes how your DNA works. It changes fundamentally, some things down at the basic level that we don't understand. It's not been tested. The usual playful games. And then it's like, well, I might get the Johnson and Johnson one, but it's like, no, that's the one they made out of aborted fetuses. Um, that's the one the Christians should not get, and he was still kind of okay with it, and it's like,
Mhm.
and that's
One
just an
is a
example.
practical issue that you. One is a practical issue that intelligent men can disagree with if you believe that the risk reward works out more in your favor. The other is a moral issue that no man should ever get for any reason, in my opinion, unless you're like on the verge of death and this can save you, which of course is not how a vaccine works,
Right,
nor is that how this disease works. So there really should be no reason for anybody to get Johnson and Johnson,
right.
especially with other alternatives if you really do want the vaccine. Those other alternatives do exist.
But
So there's
I was trying
no
to.
argument. I don't see any argument for Johnson and Johnson.
Right. There is no other argument. But what I'm saying is, even when I brought up the argument, it wasn't sufficient to. Well, this guy was a boomer, early Gen X. There wasn't any argument that this guy, would be willing to take that said, hey, what's going on is evil, and sure, this looks good, but everything around it is evil. There's a moral argument that's missing from the spirit of our leadership. And it's one of those things that frustrates me to hell and back again. I want to not see a little dark age. I don't want to see, a decline. So like I'm gonna go off on a tangent, but it's important to the title of the live stream. But so how do I want to put it? We're in the wrong section. People and blogs. Uh, educate. Sure. Save. All right. So there we go. So, even though the Enlightenment period was absolutely dicks, and the Enlightenment philosophers were basically trying to bone as many people as possible and avoid their responsibilities, they did have kind of a point about the 500s to the fall of Rome to about Charlemagne. Even though the Dark Age didn't exist, it did exist. It wasn't as bad as they like to say, oh, it was barbarians everywhere. No, there was still a Roman Senate in like 570 AD. They were just worthless and incompetent and weak. They still existed as a governing body serving the German kings there. There were still Romans in Constantinople. But what happened is a series of disasters and military campaigns that failed, but also a series of just sort of random events that meant that the world was less bright than it had been before. It's not that there wasn't a pope or that there wasn't this, that, or cities or anything else like that. It's that there wasn't any growth. There wasn't even like the weird, like, kind of like struggle growth that Rome had during its various crises. It was just dead. It was negative. Things were lost forever. And they weren't going to come back. Yes, the monks preserved vast quantities of information and books and knowledge, but they also scraped them off to produce Bibles, which is a worthy endeavor. But we still lost some. A big part of the archive work for that stuff is literally radiographing and other things these Bibles to figure out where the ink was under the ink of the scripture. Constantinople lost like a third of its population during the Dark Age, and honestly, the diseases that ravaged the land have more to do with the Dark Age than as much as anything else. Um,
Yeah,
you know,
Constantinople got hit by horrendous plagues that somehow never really get talked about in history, even though they were as bad as the Black Plague,
yep,
if not worse.
yep. Like
I
numbers.
genuinely I remember reading about like the plague of Justinian or something, and I genuinely have no idea how this doesn't make more history books since it was as bad as the Black Death.
There was probably
It
it probably curtailed Justinian's expansion as much as any rival army could.
oh, if not more so.
Mm-hmm.
100%.
Yep. And it's hard to look at it. Yes, the Enlightenment philosophers were wrong about what was going on, but they were right in that culture took a huge decline. There were less people, there was less art, the quality of art was less. Like they had like the Renaissance was not some like random, oh, we're finally building on it. No, it's we finally rediscovered the Roman techniques. Now, of course, I'm being exaggerating. Like they still remembered how to build some stuff. They still remembered perspective and stuff like that, but it still wasn't what it was. And it doesn't matter how high the Renaissance went above it. I'm saying that the Renaissance rediscovered and then grew it, but the key word is rediscovered. In other words, the knowledge was lost, and it was lost in the Dark Ages. Even the quality of Roman busts declined immensely time and time again, and the quality of coinage declined. Um, the Frankish kingdoms were more civilized than we give them credit for, but they were barbarians compared to Rome, even at the Roman Empire's worst. Um, and they weren't worthy successors until Charlemagne came by. Um, what we are a part of, the modern Roman Empire. We have an empire that stretches farther than the English Empire. Well, it's basically as far as the English Empire did, except we don't have India in some parts of Africa. Less land, more sea power, I guess I'll say. And what's going to happen to us? What sort of decline are we in? They're already censoring books. Amazon, quote unquote, had an algorithm error. They can't even control their AI servitors. You know, it's like the Foundation series. One of the best parts of the Foundation series, even though it was kind of stupid, it was still a very good scene. Was him visiting the nuclear power engineer, and the nuclear power engineer can't even replace a single valve or a tube if somebody broke it. Um, we have nuclear power. Romans didn't. Would things be different if they had more impressive power stations and stuff like that? If they had nuclear power, no, the same result would happen. Except maybe there'd be more overloads, or they would trick an army into coming near and then blowing it up or something. Who knows? There's I'm not going to be alt history here, but I'm going to be real. You know, when the American Empire collapses, what's going to happen to what we know? Just because it's on the internet does not mean, even for a minute, that it's safe on the internet. I keep careful copies of my books at different locations, and I make sure that every piece of writing I want to keep is on my computer. Well, what if China blasts us with a whole bunch of electromagnetics, and fries our stuff, or a solar flare, or who knows what? Well, guess what? That's not. That's it's it. That's it. Everything. Um, every piece of knowledge and art that I have in my head is in my head, and that's it. Maybe I've got some printouts because I do keep the work I edit, but that's not the same as growing the art. Um, yeah, it's sort of a weird thing to consider because we don't actually know what a dark age is like. There honestly hasn't been a dark age until recently, like at the beginnings of one. Sure, there were some dips during, like, the USSR, or in different locations, what Mao and Pol Pot did. But that's not the same as a global, all empire, everywhere collapse. Every kingdom on earth was at risk of collapse or was a barbaric empire during the 500s. Justinian tried to grow it, but he was hit by plagues and declined. China had upheaval. The Sassanids went into, well, they didn't have decline per se, but they weren't as they suffered the same stuff that Justinian suffered under. It was there was a it, like I don't know how to say it, like basically almost everywhere there experienced a shutdown, a decline, a ruination of trade. You know, if America goes under, English will probably remain the lingua franca of trade, but I just used a French term to describe English. Who knows how it's going to change up? Maybe I'll have to learn Chinese on the fly, which I'm up to the task, but it's still, you know, the historical prognostications are not good. It'll be fine for people in Missouri. Missouri's not going anywhere. Maybe St. Louis and Kansas City will burn. Maybe Springfield will get a little singed, but it's not going to go any different. It's not going to go any crazy. Bronze Age. Bradford Walker mentions the Bronze Age collapse. Worth reviewing for comparisons to see what learned from it. So, yes, the Bronze Age collapse was actually is different. Is comparison to the Dark Age, um, but it's different at the same time. You have the same invasion of barbarians, but you actually had more powers kind of like reviving in it. And it was, how do I want to put it? Basic.
So
Go for it.
go ahead.
No, go for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
The thing the thing about the medieval Dark Ages that you're mentioning is that, insofar as it existed, it didn't in the way that they were saying, and it was very short. The reason it was very short is because of Christianity and because of Charlemagne.
Yep.
Now, the real hot take is that, the cold take. I'm trying to think of what's the word that they use. The tepid take here
Uh-huh.
is that Christianity is what caused the fall of the Roman Empire, when the actual hot take is that Christianity saved the Roman Empire for another 1,000 or so years,
Yep.
basically doubled its lifespan. Because remember, the Byzantine Empire, as we know it due to the history books, was not called or thought of as the Byzantine Empire. It was thought of as the Eastern Roman Empire.
Yep.
And that's what it was. That's how they marketed themselves. It was a big marketing thing, and it was mostly marketing, to be fair, because they didn't control Rome except for very brief periods. Justinian conquered Rome for a short period of time, and he was the last real, in a sense, Justinian was the last real Roman emperor, but like they called themselves the Eastern Roman Empire. They marketed themselves as the Eastern Roman Empire, and that is how they were officially known to the world. Not only that, they could with accuracy trace a continuity directly back to Rome, to the original Roman Empire emperors. That continuity was there, and that was because of the Christian religion that had been spread throughout the empire and had been made it. Constantine didn't make it the official state religion of the empire, but he effectively did. He
Yep.
unofficially did. And more importantly, when Charlemagne took over, Charlemagne was actually a serious Christian. He was somebody who genuinely believed it, and we know he believed it because this was
I'll be right back,
reflected
Anthony.
in the actions that he took. Go ahead.
I'll be.
So this was reflect. Go. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I'll be right
So
back.
this was reflected. What's up?
I'll be right back.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
So this was reflected in the actions that Charlemagne took, right? Charlemagne was a real Christian emperor. He was fighting on behalf of the Pope in Rome, and he seemed to be genuinely deferential to the Pope. If he had a power dispute with the Pope, instead of storming in with his army and putting his own puppet Pope in, he would get a team of theologians and try and write counter theological proposals. This is what happened, by the way, with the Filioque controversy. One of the interesting things about the Filioque controversy was that Charlemagne believed that the Easterners, that they were actually being heretical, and he wanted the Pope to say something about it, and the Pope refused. They said, no, we're not going to call them heretical because so many of the church fathers have said exactly the same things that they're saying. I'm just going to say that we're not heretical. So, when that happened, Charlemagne could have sent in an army and tried to get a puppet pope in place. He could have told his empire that they were not to listen to the pope, but that is not what he did. What he did was he wrote basically a rival theological treatise, arguing why what the pope had written was wrong. Now, historically, as we look back on it, I believe what I had read was that Charlemagne's interpretation of things was based on a misinterpretation, but it's an important point in how Charlemagne handled these conflicts. He did not handle them with the army, and he did not handle them with imperial power. He handled it by fighting theology with theology. He respected the Pope as somebody who was of a different type, a different, had a different sort of authority than he did. And the naming of his empire, the Holy Roman Empire, was of course very intentional, and of course made the Eastern Roman Empire, especially the Empress Irene, who was a piece of work, uh, extraordinarily livid. They were incredibly angry about this. It was kind of a shots fired thing, but the Eastern Roman Empire wasn't in a position at the time to challenge Charlemagne over a name dispute or something like that. But that doesn't mean they were happy about it. They were very, very much not happy about it.
Yep.
So what you got in that era was the Holy Roman Empire and the Eastern Roman Empire coexisting at the same time, and both of them had a semi-legitimate claim to being the real Roman Empire, because the Holy Roman Empire actually controlled Rome, even though that wasn't his capital. Uh, his capital was Aachen, I think.
Yeah.
Can't remember off the top of my head,
Aiken,
but I think Aachen.
Achean or something like that.
Something like that. But he had control of Rome, so he could, with some accuracy, claim to be the legitimate Roman Empire. And the Eastern Roman Empire had the continuity going back to Rome, so they could, with some accuracy, claim to be the Eastern Roman Empire. The thing is that after Charlemagne took over, he was a Christian king, so once the immediate threat to the Christians and the Christian lands around him was ended because of Charlemagne's fighting, he stopped his fighting, and then he started building universities and cathedrals and commissioning new church music be created, and basically flourished in a new age of learning and culture because Charlemagne was a legitimate Christian king.
Yep.
And there is a reason that he is to this day known as Blessed Charlemagne. He had his flaws as an individual person, had multiple wives and things like that, but he really did believe in what he was, he believed in the religion that he was spreading. It was legitimate, and he was trying to make the world better as a result of what he was doing, and he did.
Yep.
So that dark age was very short, and it was very short because of Christianity.
Yep. We're talking like maybe, 300 years if you're being very exaggerated with it. I
And
wouldn't even
remember,
say
the
that.
Eastern Roman Empire, still being around, was still keeping some of that flame alive already.
Yep. The thing with the Bronze Age collapse is that it's not as easy to sort of talk about it, partly because we know very little about it compared to, say, Rome's collapse, for obvious reasons. But the biggest one is that they didn't write down their history nearly as much as Rome did. Um, and even then we have, like, the classics thing is, oh, we've got more evidence for Jesus Christ than Julius Caesar, when it's like, so um he still existed. Both of them still existed. No one's going to be questioning the existence of Julius Caesar uh over.
No, but the point of that argument rhetorically is that nobody questions the existence of Julius Caesar, but
Right.
people actually do question the existence of Christ, so I find it to be a good rhetorical point.
Oh, it is. I mean, more as a literal like argument thing, which
Well,
some
no,
people do.
both of them exist, because you're right that if you really wanted to be cheeky about it, I guess the other conclusion is I guess Caesar doesn't exist,
Right.
but nobody's going to do that, which is why it works as a good rhetorical argument.
So apparently it's Achim or something. Like Henry. There we go.
Something like that.
I like.
I have been long since been an admirer of Charlemagne, so
Yep. So and it.
who I think is one of the models we should have for a Christian king, even more than Constantine.
Oh yeah. Like Constantine was pretty great, but he was a product of his times, and he was a proper Roman emperor, if you get me.
Constantine converted probably on his deathbed, and he was also probably baptized by an Arian bishop, which is kind of
Okay.
a sketchy thing. With that said, it does raise the question of, Constantine did get baptized, and if he did it on his deathbed, that also sort of makes you think he must have actually believed it, at least to a point,
Right.
because he had no other
Well,
reason.
he did, have
He,
that vision and such like, famously. Um,
Well, supposedly. So what I'm saying is, if he got baptized and it was on his deathbed, right? Then that does lend some credence to the idea, if you are a skeptic, that there was a point that he must have believed it at least somewhat, because there was no, like, rhetorical value to him getting baptized on his deathbed. He was dying. You know, it wouldn't benefit him, but he did it anyway.
Right.
So now he was baptized by an Arian, which actually makes the baptism kind of suspect, because Arians have a weird, you know, they
They have a
the
weird
way
view
that
on
they
Christ.
view the Godhead.
Yeah.
Yeah, the way they view the Godhead is suspect, which makes the baptism kind of suspect, actually. So, for his sake, I hope that things worked out with him.
Right.
But he was a great king. He
Right.
was known at the time. The Christians absolutely adored him, and that's because he ended the persecution of he
He,
never went quite so far as to make it the official religion, but the Christians of the time period just adored Constantine. I mean, you would, right?
yep. I mean, the one who did it was Theodosius, but Theodosius does not deserve the title the Great. For all his contributions, quote unquote, to Christianity, he did very little for Rome and actively was part of the reason. Like, there's the meme version where he's like the Virgin compared to Chad Constantine as the Great. But in reality, he brought great sorrow on the Roman people by bringing in more barbarians and not like making choices that would benefit Rome, but rather more himself. Um, it's like the Roman Empire was already pretty far gone by his point, but he didn't help at all. He does not deserve to be called the Great. Um, the I want to dial back to the Bronze Age collapse because there's some important things about it. The thing about the Bronze Age collapse was that it was very top heavy. It was very centralized around the capitals. Um, there was a whole lot of farming that was being done, and even though these people were not stupid, um, a lot of times they made choices that was just bad long term farming. So it would work, but then it would decline. And they hadn't figured out a bunch of stuff that we know today. Um, there was also a lack of literacy, and even though there was plenty of art being made, it wasn't the same sort of situation as the Roman or as the we'll call it the Roman Dark Age, I guess. As the Dark Age is fine, or as what's coming here. Uh, this isn't like I'm not despair mongering with this stuff. When I say that art has declined, art has declined very much here. Even besides the awards that are going to literal trolls and people who do not deserve any accolades at all. There's sort of a loss of what's good. Creators actively hate their fans. In this case, they'll show up at a show and basically denounce them. When of course the Chad response to being denounced is "so what" or "get off my stream." I don't care how powerful you are. I don't have I really need to get Corey to give me admin privileges. But basically, that would be my response. If I can't get the person to leave the stream who's doing that, I'm gonna end the stream and then restart it once they're gone because that's unacceptable behavior. Like what we're experiencing is a loss of skill, talent, and a thousand other things. Sure, Dracula is just a slog to read through sometimes, even though I enjoy it. I enjoy it very much. Um, it's the quality of writing has declined quite a bit compared to what the previous generations enjoyed and what generations before them enjoyed. The pulp masters were genuinely masters. People like Philip K. Dick and Poul Anderson were masters, and there were more masters of the craft than we have today working. There's John C. Wright and Nick Cole, and the masters of yesterday are streaming Dungeons and Dragons on Twitch for pennies. Let's see here. Christopher Cortum says, read a book a few years ago about the Bronze Age collapse. Combo of overstepping the soil with bad farming, famine, drought, and I bet you're going to talk about invaders and the sea people. It's weird how invasions always preface Dark Ages. I'm sure there was also great disease. They just didn't talk about it. Partially because they didn't have the language that the Romans did. You know, it's our art is already at the point where, you know, the busts of Roman Empire emperors are ugly. You know, the busts of senators are ugly. And then he continues. Christopher Cortum continues. Apparently, most of the 10 came from a few mines in Afghanistan and Cornwall. Suddenly lost access to that source, and all economic basis on the bronze collapsed, focusing on the war for food and 10 traces. Yes, basically. Um, yeah, with what we have to look forward to, we have you know, we continue to look forward to the decline. And the problem is that because so much stuff is digital, art might be well and truly lost. And I'm talking like lost for good. Um, you know, you wipe a hard drive, that stuff's gone. You know, maybe you can pick up some files of it. You know, maybe you'll find a Nick Cole book or a John C. Wright book, you know, on some scraps of a hard drive. But that's not of a Kindle. You know, that's not the same. He says, Christopher Cordum says, well, the Sea Peoples from the guy's perspective is more of a refugee crisis after the collapse was set. That is not something I'd ever argue against, just because, yeah, I could see that. And there's also digital artworks. Like, I have a large collection of digital artwork. I do not document where I get it. I have some files in my system that are 10 years old or older that I just picked up, you know, from people from like DeviantArt or whatever. Like it's you know, to lose those pieces of art, like let's say the internet wipes out, but not hard drives. Well, guess what? I might have the only copy of a piece of art. I might have the only copy of a manga in North America just because I saved one panel of it on my hard drive. You know, it's a real fear. It's a real existence. The Planetary Anthology series. I've got physical copies. Does anyone else have a physical copy? Do you have any physical copies?
You're asking? No, I don't.
Right. And I don't even have all of them. I have only the ones that I've interacted with or I have a story in. So, in other words, there's like 5 or 6 copies of the Planetary Anthology series that might be well and truly lost. You know, these are, you know, the Planetary Anthology series is a good, you know, 100 to 150 short stories over 13 anthologies, if I remember correctly. You know, or 11, 11. So in other words, you know, that's it. You know, and it's you know, unlike the Fahrenheit 451, nobody has to burn the books. The servers just have to go down. You know, like I joke about, yeah, baby, you can order the Unabomber Manifesto on Amazon, you know, because you know the buying stuff through a overstuffed commercial internet tech space, you know, godless and actively antagonistic towards Christianity is exactly what Teddy K, you know, intended. Um, you know, we're reaching levels of post irony and irony that are absolutely vicious, that are societal sicknesses. Um, you know what can be done about this stuff, you know, besides buy physical copies? Well, sure, but I can't buy all the books that are put out. I'm not going to print out fan fictions that are worth reading. um, you know, not that fan fictions are high art, but they're art of a sort. It's how a lot of people got started with their writing in this generation. Um, and I'm sure that's how authors in previous generations got writing. They didn't just sit down and go, I'm going to make a book today. No, they read things. They had ideas. They put stuff together. Um, it's it was based on the cultures that came before. Gothic horror, you know, whether from Poe or the Castle of Otranto, you know, had roots behind it to the actual physical locations, to the Gothic romances. and to just the weird fiction of the 1500s. The tragedy, the decay, the horror of it. We've got copies of it. I've got copies of a couple very old books in my collection. I do enjoy collecting rare books, but it's I don't know. It's something to be wary of. I know I'm ranting here, but like, consider what will happen to well, think about what will happen with like Combat Frame Exceed or Galaxy's Edge. I've got physical copies. Nicole has physical copies, and I know other people have physical copies. It just keeps going round and round and round. I don't know
Look,
what to
the
say.
elephant in the room here is that Pinkerton's ghost is going down as soon as the internet collapses.
Don't say it, Anthony. Don't say it. But yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. My laptop, you guys' computers, and the internet go down. That's it. I've got more hope for the unauthorized TV server, but let's be real. If everything's going down, it's going down too. Um,
On the other hand, if anybody could put a stop to that, it's Fox Day.
right, right. Low key, keeping the flame alive by himself. He's like, "Don't bother me," but you've done so much. Shut up. I'm just here to sip some wine. Uh,
Out of the skull of my enemies.
yep. The collapse of civilization has really done good things to my silverware. Oh,
So we have this effect with film too. Something like half of the early movies we know existed, we only have summary blurbs of. Nosferatu was one thought lost, other than a few clips for a long time. Oh yeah, I've looked at film history, and some of the films that were lost for a long period of time are crazy.
yep.
Like the first Oscar winner, Wings, was like a lost film for decades. Like this was the film that won the first Academy Award, and we just didn't have it. It didn't exist for decades.
Yep.
It's really kind of insane. Early film, how easy it is to lose those early films. It's amazing.
Metropolis. Absolutely. You know what's funny is
Yeah,
in 100 years or something, they think the anime one was the real one. Though I do like the anime one.
the anime Metropolis is good, but totally unrelated.
Yeah, pretty much. It's got that aesthetic
And
though.
I don't think it was meant to be related either.
Really?
No, it was a manga by Osamu Tezuka, and then they made a completely unrelated movie about it.
Huh.
Now, here is something interesting. So, I promise I'll get back on topic, but I just thought, since we're talking about it, I thought this was interesting. I own the movie. I got it from Walmart cheap, and I enjoy it. It's a good movie. It's not mold breaking or anything, but visually it's stunning, and I like the soundtrack.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and it does its job story wise, right?
Yep.
It's solid. So, Metropolis is a good movie. Yeah, but I saw an interview with one of the actresses in the movie. Yeah, one of the voice actresses. They had a little making of feature, and they just did a little thing. And the actress said she saw the movie, and this was kept on the version of the DVD that I own. They kept this. She said I didn't like it. She was like, it was not the movie that I thought it would be. Was not happy with it. And I'm like, I can't believe they released this. It's kind of weird.
Yep.
Just, you know, but apparently, what I just said about the movie having the plot is very straight. It's not mold breaking and it's very straightforward, and there isn't, that's the big criticism of Metropolis. If you've read any Isaac Asimov stuff at all, has the same sort of I'm trying to think about it, but it has the same sort of themes and ideas and whatever. Uh,
I was gonna make a joke where it's
so
like, oh, it's like Asimov. Is there an incest subtext too?
Yeah, raunchy,
I know.
but whatever.
This is what they come for.
No, but whatever. But anyway, that's like the big criticism of Metropolis. That doesn't really do anything new with the ideas, and the story is very straightforward, but it executes it well enough. So I could sort of see why somebody who was working on it, and they must have thought they were making this big Osamu Tezuka epic. Only the movie, as it turned out, the plot is not at all similar to the original Osamu Tezuka. Yeah, like the Tezuka manga and the anime as finished are basically unrelated except in aesthetic. The villain of the movie was not in the manga. They added Rock as the villain. He was not
Huh.
in the manga version of the story.
Huh.
Yeah. So I could sort of see why, like, they must have thought it was just going to be like this massive, sci-fi epic, and then it turned into a very straightforward, or the robot, who's the real, I don't know, monster, the robot or the human story.
It's the
And it does it fine, and I
humans.
like it. Yeah, right? It does it fine, and I like it, and it looks great, and it sounds great, and it's not like, it's not an insultingly bad story or anything. The plot hangs together and whatever, but it definitely isn't mind-blowing. So I could see how if you were working on it and you were expecting something more ambitious, you could be disappointed in how it ended up. But
Yeah,
anyway, that's my tangent, just because we brought it up. I got nothing else to
that's fair. So with this, so with this stuff, we're talking about art. We're talking about what we can sort of expect from our current state of technology, as well as kind of the spirit in which it's made. We're not breaking new ground. I just watched the Drinkers video about sort of Marvel. Well, maybe.
Marvel Phase 4.
Yep.
I
Maybe
watched it.
it's a good video. Um, but it's like, what is anyone interested in? The Infinity War's over, and even then, it nearly fell flat in its face. And you can make a strong argument that it did fall flat in its face, but honestly, it made up enough money that it doesn't matter too much. It's it's difficult to sort of like point out, oh well, this is the fall, this is the fall. No, like it's a long, slow, involved process. It started 20 years ago. Where I'm going to shift away. We talk a lot about art, but I'm kind of going to move it away from like art and into kind of economics for a bit. People spent money on the Marvel movies. Disney should, I don't think it is, but it should be sitting on a huge pile of treasure from it. Maybe even enough to keep its vestiges alive until stuff happens where it can start making money again. Maybe when it rediscovers how to actually entertain people, but who knows? But we've been in a depression since 2008, and that collapse. The empire started to have issues 2001 when the CIA let um, a dude they trained to fight Americans and Russians do his thing with a certain set of towers. There's there's all kinds of things that are happening right now that we don't even know what the end result will be. There's still questions, there's still conspiracy theories out there that aren't just, well, it was aliens who took down them towers. No. No. Like, sure, the plane did take down the towers. I've seen it. But it was something. No, shut up. Like, whatever your argument is, the towers fell. But then there's all this stuff that's missing, some information that's missing, money missing from the Pentagon, all this different stuff that's just not answered, and probably won't be answered while we still breathe. Uh, but what can we do about that stuff? We can do nothing. Nothing. We are literally sitting down, speaking into the void and the 5 to 10 people who are listening right now, and saying, "Hey, we are seeing the beginning of the crisis of, our crisis of the third century. However, there's no telling what will happen. back in those times, it would take months to do anything and go anywhere. Sure, barbarian hordes were showing up all over the place, but the loss of men was devastating for them. And the Huns nearly destroyed them as they were coming in. There's all these different things that were happening for them, but it was slow. Sure, the battles were fast and vicious, and guys like Decius only lasted a couple years, but they still fought immense battles, and there was even times of peace going into it. When Aurelian put down the crisis of the third century, he was sort of like the hero that ended the climax. He wasn't the guy who ruled through all of it. Guys like Gallienus and Valerius actually ruled for quite some time. I think 20 years between them as co-emperors. Valerius being the father. Uh, and there's even an argument to be made that the fifth century was even worse than the third century, and it certainly was because that's when it's collapsed. I'm being dumb here, but it doesn't get the same sort of name. It's just the fall of the empire. Um, Christopher Cordum says the conspiracy theory stuff is comforting because it means even the bad stuff is some sort of overall control, sort of a plan that provides easy answers. Yep, but the thing is that like I do not believe that every CIA agent would be okay with Al Qaeda's existence back in the 70s. They chose specific people to make it happen. Just as the same time, with stuff that happens with the ATF in Waco, I don't think every ATF agent is just drooling to shoot a dog. But having the leader of the ATF being the guy who led Waco, is kind of a warning sign, isn't it? There's enough there to prove evil. But the thing is, we already know evil exists. That's the one of the tenets of Christianity. Evil exists. The answer for it is Jesus Christ, and I'm being very simplistic with that. Uh, what sort of things, are we supposed to do about it? We can't do anything about it. We can't do anything about what the East Coasters decide to do, or what weird things the West Coasters are getting up into. It's just there. That's it. And they'll call it whatever they want because the media obeys them. The goal isn't to be like, oh, we got to band together to be some sort of militia. No, the goal is to take as much art as you can and hole up in a place to preserve your family, and preserve, what's yours. Who knows who's gonna win? Mike Pence crushed whatever Donald Trump could do when he did what he did, and accepted the book deal for it. You think anyone wants to buy $4 million of a book by ghost written for Mike Pence? No, that's nonsense. Nobody's going to do it. They're going to sit in a warehouse somewhere because they got to make sure that those trees are cut down because they have lumber interests. It's so I'm gonna. That was a disguised payoff. Yes, it was a disguised payoff from the beginning. So let's chart the decline. There was a cultural decline starting in the 1970s. All book deals are payoffs. Yep. There was a cultural decline that started in the 1970s. There were two periods of immense growth. Post Civil War, once the war had settled down and the fires were stopped burning, there was a growth in the Yankee part of the country, which people mistake for the Third Great Awakening. There was not a spiritual growth, it was that people consolidated a Christian culture across America. In those days, I doubt the copies are contracted or ever published. Yes, but no, because of how they have tree interests. They got to pay for the trees. I am the Lorax, and I cut down books, and I cut down trees for books that'll never be read. So there was a spiritual collapse in the 1970s. Boomers, hippie movement. Basically, people did not fight to keep their culture alive. That's the big thing. They did not gatekeep Christianity or Christian culture. It was allowed to happen for the things that we're experiencing now. Because if people just go to church and think they're okay, they will they will go to hell. That's how it is. Persecution leads to more faith. The Gilded Age coincides with the post-American Civil War expansion of Yankeedom. Yep. So and I don't want to just like overpass it because the Gilded Age was very important, but that's not what we're talking about today. Sometime I'll start talking about it because I actually have done a lot of research into that through newspapers. So, which leads to some very fun things that I don't dare talk about. So the 1970s was an age of spiritual collapse. Christianity was cultural, but it was not real. I point to the 1970s when actuality it began in the 1960s, but it wasn't noticeable until the 1970s when you have the megachurches in power rather than getting started. Even though megachurches got started in the 1950s and 60s, they were not as corrupt as they are now. Or were in the night going into the 1970s, where you have the most corrupt ministers, the most people going around offering miracles. Indian gurus were wandering the country. A whole bunch of cults got started in the 1970s. It is uncontroversial that this stuff happened then. And it was started because they would not fight for their culture. Or if they did it poorly. They allowed some things because it's fun and good times. They did not keep the soul of the country. So we lost the soul. In reality, most of the CIA that existed during the 1980s should have been hung from the fucking Statue of Liberty. Pardon my language, I just feel very strongly about this. They created a lot of the problems that we have today when it comes to people outside this country. And they did it to fight the USSR, but they didn't think about anything beyond fighting the USSR. David Halquist has talked to me about how it felt to hear of the Berlin Wall collapsing and stuff like that, of USSR collapsing, and he's like, nobody knew it would come. But I actually kind of think that powers that be did. They had to have. They pretty much swooped on it immediately in the 1990s. Even though I was a kid, I still remember all the weird stuff that happened in Russia during the 1990s and early aughts before Putin came to power. So we have this setup. Then we have the height of culture, going into the 80s, but it's decadent culture. And then we have the 90s, which was a more static, not so crazy sort of thing compared to the 80s. And then we had the aughts, September 11th. We had various collapses in business deals go through, and we had a president who wasn't really. So here's the thing about George W. Bush. He looked weak, but there is no way in hell that he could have been weak. He ran did he run the CIA, or what was it his daddy? Point is that he was very powerful.
I don't know.
He ran Texas, and he had all kinds of CIA connections. I believe his daddy was he ran the CIA. We can see, I do point to the 90s as one of the heights of American culture, but not just for what the Gen Y says. Art was very good then. Things were peaceable, except for the occasional riot. We were on top of the world with no rivals. So September 11th happens. The safety bubble is popped. But also a whole lot of different things happened that interfered with American liberty. American liberty started to decline ferociously at that point. Christopher Cortum says, Dad knew it was coming early 80s. He was military transport. They were flying Russian ministry guys around to coordinate opening relations. Absolutely. I don't believe anyone who got on top of the murder pile like Gorbachev did was any sort of idiot. He knew things were happening, so he wanted to make sure Russia didn't entirely implode. He might be one of those guys who in the long term will be viewed as a savior of Russia, just like Putin. So we had the various things that went on in the aughts. You were born then, but you probably don't remember all the things that were happening. There was like the axis of evil: Syria, Iraq, and Iran, and of course Afghanistan and Indonesia, and it's all these different places, and they had this weird spirit to it. that I ate up as a kid. It was very fascinating watching all the military stuff go by, the battles. Brian Williams, I was there. Dan Rather lying his teeth out, all this stuff. But it was a collapse of liberty, and the media consolidated around the collapse, not against it. It became the propaganda arm of the United States government around that time. And sure, there was the opposition, but the opposition was always controlled, except it was Democrat controlled opposition. And then it became Republican controlled opposition during the Obama years. And of course, he didn't do anything for it. Everyone knows that Obama did nothing, and he actually dropped more bombs than just about anyone else in that area. The damage he did to Syria will be remembered forever. The and they'll probably hate us for it. Like, they're never going to be a superpower, really. But at the same time, it was a bad move. Afghanistan is the graveyard of empires for a reason. We're supposedly withdrawing from it, but honestly, we'll never withdraw until the actual collapse comes. There's a meme right now where it goes. It doesn't go who it is, but it's Joaquin Phoenix talking to the director, and the director is describing something. And so you do this, and the under Joaquin Phoenix it says, "Listen, dude, I don't care. I'm just going through the motions until the shooting starts." We're at that stage. 2008 was the financial collapse. It was set up before Obama ever took office, and some people like to blame it on Democrats, but honestly, the only people who were really to blame for that were all the corrupt businessmen who corrupted politicians. Like it wasn't just one person who did that; it was the entire system. We have not recovered from it. I do not understand the economics enough to say why, but we just haven't. Everyone I've seen who talks about it that I respect basically says the same thing. And then they show me a chart that goes, ooh, and I go, ooh, it's a chart. But I don't understand it. Not out of like a dickishness, but as out of just, it's lines and graphs, and the lines go down. Chad face, lines go down, economic depression. They called it the recession for the longest time. And they're like, we're out of the recession. We're out of the recession. Every year it seemed that they would say something like, we're out of the recession. But it never felt good. Like, I've been a manager in multiple positions. I never got paid very well. And sure, they were crappy jobs, but you'd think that those things would pay well. And considering the age of the companies that I was in, they had paid well years ago. I was in legacy positions that had been paid well before 2008. Um, it just keeps going on and on. And I look back on it. What are we going towards? And how can we interact with it? Bradford Walker gives us the good point. Whatever the official narrative is a lie. Absolutely. You know, they wanted us to have hope. They wanted this money. They wanted this power. They wanted this economics of a vibrant and healthy United States. But that's never going to happen again until something changes, and it's more likely going to be government than anything else. After the 2008 election, 2008 collapse, people talk about Enron, but Enron was just the poster child, the whipping boy, who, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't really do anything for me. I was a kid, I wasn't working, I have no idea what any of it meant. I could read books about it, but it just comes down to corruption. The corruption that never went away, that oftentimes got golden parachutes and got jobs with the Fed. All right, we just went through a period where we had 4.2% increase in inflation. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if the real number is supposed to be 4 times that. So how do you like that? 4 pennies and a bit is lessened from every dollar you own in your. Oh, you missed a lot, Megabuster Shepherd. Bad. Christopher Cortum says, expect another subprime mortgage bubble in 10 to 20 years tops. Obama reinstated it last year he was in office. Yeah, there's all kinds of things going on with property that I have no idea how to deal with. even mentally. Like, what are we supposed to do with the boomer land? What are we supposed to do with the government buying up crap tons of land? How in the world are we supposed to own territory with this? The answer is we're not, but at the same time, because a landowning people is a free people. Uh, but there's all these things going on, military issues, land issues, tax issues, unemployment. Honestly, they should just move to UBI for everyone and say screw it, just dive off. Because quite frankly, toilet paper is more valuable in some states. Uh, rioting, destruction of property, and it goes more and more, deeper and deeper and deeper. I was talking with my barber. Um, we still love you, Mega Buster. I was talking with my barber, and he's like, "Yeah, man, Ebonics is just becoming its he's whack. Ebonics is becoming its own language." I'm like, "Dude, yeah, I know it, but that's a problem because once we can't talk to each other, we're going to be in real bad crap. It's going to be 100 years." And he didn't slit my throat while he shaved me, so we're still not quite at the IRA level of Ireland burning, sort of level of troubles. Um, but at some point we'll get there. Not with that barber. He's a nice guy and he likes me and I tip him well because you got to tip the guy who holds a razor to your throat well. But it's what can we say about it? I earned less or equal to, and maybe sometimes slightly more than people on. I'm just going to call it UBI unemployment last year, and I was cleaning up heroin addicts' crap from toilets. Like, what kind of life is that? Do you truly live if you're earning less than people who are lazy? The governor of Missouri has removed unemployment benefits just as I was applying for it, which hurts. It hurts because it's like, listen, if the plebs are being bribed, take the bribes and buy whatever your heart desires, whatever keeps you safe. Um, that was in the recent years. I'm not going to talk about the virus because the virus was just a thing of control, a thing of fear, and it sort of showed where the lines will be. Were you a fearful man, or were you somebody who handled it? Megabuster Shepard says, I cannot wait for the raiding herdsman era post American collapse. I mean, come on, we're all just waiting for the Fallout New Vegas America, aren't we? You know,
Of course.
of course, for some reason, a lot of those videos are showing up. Actually, there's a great Joshua Graham video about the light in the darkness. It's great, feels good. Um, you know, and that's the stuff I experience. I'm 31 years old, 31 and three quarters at this point. I don't have much prospects. I know most of the people of my age group, of my age cohort, are having issues. Um, there are 1,000 little things that are happening that, we know portend doom. We see it. I don't have to be some dude with a poster board naked, screaming about the end of the world. Um, Jobs are paying higher wages around here due to the lack of workers, 15 an hour. I'm going to have to go find some work for a bit if this unemployment thing goes through. But quite frankly, I don't want to go back to cleaning crap off toilets. It doesn't feel right to me. It doesn't feel good. I can't take pride
So,
in a clean whatever if people are being paid more for nothing. Go on. Sorry.
no, I'm agreeing with you because I'm just gonna point out here. This is like another thing that I hear from people who are insistent that the millennial generation, and you're Gen Y technically, but
Yep.
the younger generations are lazy and don't want to work. You know, what are the jobs we're working? So somebody told me like, you worked retail, I worked as a bartender and I managed to pay off my job. That's what you should be getting work as. So people are coming up with creative ways to pay off their loans and things like that, which is great, but most people are simply not that creative or don't have that opportunity, but they are trying to work. So the idea is that they're like, why is nobody work? I swear to you, this was a real thread I saw. Somebody goes that they were paying people to like pick the plants from a farm, on the south of the border, and now they were having immigrants do it. When they asked, "Why are you having immigrants do it? Are you paying them any less?" And they said no, but nobody else wants to take the work. Well, besides the fact that the cost of living has gone up, and if you still haven't raised your paycheck in 20 years, of course those same people aren't going to want to do that work for a job that isn't going to help them, right?
Yep.
But besides that, you know, you're getting away with not raising those prices by giving the work to immigrants. So now this is where you get people saying immigrants are taking your job. And last of all, we are now at the point of criticizing people for not wanting to do manual labor when they are being offered the opportunity not to because of government unemployment benefits. That they should not be taking those benefits and they should be working manual labor. Why? I don't know. I guess because there's value in hard work.
Right.
To which case you're like, so I don't understand. What's the value in me picking crops at $15 an hour? Or really probably like $12 an hour, right? For
Yep.
8 hours a day in the hot South, in the hot New Mexican sun, when I can make the same amount of money doing nothing because the government will just give it to me.
Yep.
It wasn't my idea to make the government do this, but if they're offering it to me, and you're going to call me lazy for accepting it because I don't want to do this job? Let's face it, you don't want to either. You just had to.
Yep.
Don't be mad at me for playing the game. Now, with that said, I am not a person who is taking unemployment, and God willing, I hope I won't be. But who cares if you accept it?
Right.
It's being offered to you. It's not really my business.
If you've had a
You know,
job, you paid into it. Like it's yours to take. Uh,
And even if it wasn't, like they're offering you the unemployment. It wasn't my job. If it were up to me, right now I know places are getting rid of unemployment, and I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. Though I haven't thought it over enough to think if I really support it or not. But
hmm.
inherently, I don't think it's a bad thing to say, hey, let's get rid of unemployment to encourage more people to work.
The thing is that it hurts because, you know, it's already been there. Like the problem is that they opened a door and it's stuck open. Work is fundamentally good for the soul. It is good to work. It's good for the mindset, it's good for the body, it's good for everything to not be lazy. All right? I want to make
It
that
is,
very
yes.
clear. I even though I am not working any official job, I am still working all the time. I have a job from a friend. I've got some yard work I need to do. I mowed the lawn yesterday and I wrote 7,000 words in one sitting. All right, I work. But the thing is, it's about pay and it's about the idea of what makes you feel fulfilled. How can I work on something that actively derides me? Or how can I take pride in something and still have to listen to some boomer complaining about a McDonald's manager who wasn't prompt with his burger, which is a real thing I've had to deal with, and it was a DoorDash person. Joe Katzman, excuse me, has some comments. The CIA was 100% oblivious. That's a surprise. They were famously clueless about the USSR for decades, to the point where the Reagan had to create an independent team, Beethoven, I guess, to consider that the USSR might have weaknesses. With that said, our mistake was not dismantling our military-industrial complex after the Cold War, but Bush was CIA. That's right. I knew what one of them was, and Clinton seemed to have lots of links to the CIA, including some dark ones. Absolutely. In one of my most recent short stories, I imply that Arkansas is a dark place because of the Clintons. And the Praetorian Guards take over the country began to gather. Yep. I believe that the Praetorian Guard did not take over until sometime post September 11th, but it was set up by them. Like it's a slow process, even though we got faster than like, communication, basically. Megabuster Shepherd, me, I can't sit at home. It's anathema to me. I gotta go do something. Might not be at a grocery store much longer, but I want to work. It gives me structure. Yes. So for me, I am not a structured person, but I am a person who naturally desires to work. I like sitting down and spending 12 hours writing, editing, and formatting. I do it regularly. I literally sit down, put a music track on loop like Little Dark Age or something by MGMT, and just go ba 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 ba. I wrote 7,000 words in like 8 hours. And that was with breaks and lunch and stuff like that. It's as long as you're working on something in a way that works for you, you are doing good for the soul. I assume, that you're not writing something that's bad for the soul, but it's there. Christopher Cordum says Rome had similar issues with the government, with the guaranteed wheat bread ration. Citizens were still demanding their ration after the empire split, and the Western Empire had already functionally collapsed. Absolutely, we're at the beginning stages of that, and the problem is that saying don't take the bread when it's being given freely, well, I can take the bread and work on things that the government doesn't know about. I can take the bread and then claim, oh, something, something, something. The government is inherently dishonest with you. As long as you're not, explicitly, taking something out of someone else's mouth. Which, by the way, the government prints so much money, you're never going to be in that position. It's not. There's no sin in it. There's no sin issue with taking bread and laboring. Um, but it had been a cultural institution for like 1,000 years, and everyone went through the motions until they just couldn't anymore. That's right. Like we're going through the motions until the shooting starts. It's not going
Yeah,
to.
so as far as where we're at right now in terms of cultural collapse, the truth is I really have no idea how much longer we have. I just know it can't be stopped.
Yep.
Now, this is of course with the caveat without a miracle, but here's where I disagree with a lot of the people. Like, in this case, I will openly disagree with John C. Wright, who said he believes that there is going to be a miracle. It's not that what he's saying is impossible. It's that what exactly has America done to make you think that God is going to enact a miracle on our behalf? Like what? Seriously, I want to know. Like, what is it? What's the great works that America, as it's currently constructed, is observing? Is it the millions of dead babies every day? Is that why God decides to spare us? Is
Yeah.
it because we have drag queen story hour? That's why God's going to spare us? No, we're not going to be spared because we don't deserve to be spared. This has nothing to do with the mercy of God. In fact, it is because of the justice of God that we won't be spared. I don't know how long the collapse will be. As Brian Niemeyer has said many times, what we could do right now is mitigate it with prayer, but we cannot stop it.
Yep. So he.
And it could be literally anywhere between like within the next 4 to 20 years.
Yep.
I think we
Uh,
could see the end of it. I don't know.
Box Day usually says somewhere around, I guess, 10 to 13. But I
Yes,
think
but
he's
Vox Day is
optimistic.
incredibly bad at predicting the future, so I,
He's
I put
i-
no stock into that.
in a rational world, he would be right, but the world is fundamentally absurd.
Exactly.
We love Vox Day here. He's been very kind to us. But
Oh yeah. This has nothing to do. I agree with Vox Day about most of his points, but in terms of predicting things that will happen in the future, he gets Donald Trump right, and that's basically been the only one. He talks about the economic collapse, but the truth is, he always needs to qualify his talk about the economic collapse in quite a bit. Uh, so
Yeah.
he was wrong about the House winning. He was wrong about Donald Trump's second election. He was wrong about Donald Trump winning the popular vote, which he thought he would, and he did not.
I mean,
Uh, he was right about Trump getting elected, but that's basically been like the only major issue he's been correct about.
yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, how much can we really predict? Maybe the miracle will happen, but the thing is that this is how the miracle is going to take place. Everyone in America, or enough of them, enough people in America will take a 180 on their relationship to God and turn to Him en masse. That's the only way there's going to be a miracle. I'm talking a complete cultural shift in less than a year. All right, that's not how revivals work. You know, and secondly, like Anthony says, what are we that deserve a reprieve? Of course, well, we don't personally deserve a reprieve from sin, from the punishments of sin either, but the blood of Jesus Christ, covers us. Our faith in Jesus Christ makes us, Christians. But the thing is that that's just us. It's not the nation. God treats the nations like people, that they have sins, that they have things that are wrong with them. I'll be with you in a minute, Bradford. That's a good point though. God doesn't play around with these terms. He is strict, straight language with it, and he doesn't turn aside either. Sure, there are things where like the Ninevites repented of their sin, but they went back to it eventually, and they were destroyed. Um,
True, the Ninevites, though, are a great example of what we would need to do in order to mitigate the disaster, in order to stop, I should say, not mitigate, but stop the disaster.
yep,
That's actually a really good example. If everybody repented in sackcloth and ashes for 30 straight days or something along those lines, then maybe the miracle will happen. I
yep,
don't see anybody doing that.
yep. Bradford Walker says, I think he's saying Vox will be wrong about the economic collapse also, as will everyone else, because the currency of the worlds are all digital, can be created and destroyed at will. The printers aren't even printers anymore. Art, I think you mean aren't, not are. They can run indefinitely and collapse for any reason other than the physical resources collapsing or disaster of the world. By a disaster or war is now off the table. Yeah, there's a point to that. That is true. Money is mostly digital, but it's tied to the dollar. We call it the petrodollar, and it is the money that everyone spends. Part of the reason they got rid of Gaddafi and Saddam Hussein was because they were willing to go off the petrodollar and sell oil for gold, among other things. We might see a petro yuan at some point, but there's a lot of things that are going on that we just can't foresee. Um, but to go back to Nineveh, revival has happened in America before, and during times of quasi crisis. It happened during the formation. The First Great Awakening happened more or less when the country started to pull itself together as a people, and the Second Great Awakening happened after, and I believe preceded the Civil War. Um, you know, I my answer to the whole problem is exile, self-exile. I'm leaving. I want to get out of here. I don't want to experience this. I don't want to have to fight my way out of St. Louis. Will I if it collapses tomorrow? Yes. Don't mistake me saying I just want to leave with I'm not going to lay down my life for my family and for the people I love. They'll probably put a cap in me or whatever 5 minutes into it, but I am going to, I'm not going to be a coward about this. I'm not going to sell out my own people. The Anthony, super volcano, meteor, or Canadian invasion.
Like we should be worried about a Canadian invasion. They may be the one country that's more pos than we are. No, I'm just kidding. America's actually comparative to Europe is really not as pos. America does what Europe does slightly slower.
Yep. But the
Uh,
hmm,
Hold on. Megabuster Shepard does say, I think we have 20 to 30 years before we get invaded or we implode. That's optimistic, because I thought 20 years was the long end. I
yeah.
think that something's going to happen anywhere between 4 and 20 years.
So
Uh,
so with
Sometime,
mm,
because it's precipitated by the fact that Donald Trump was the short arresting of the development. He could not accomplish what he had to accomplish. So that's it. It's over.
yep.
Now,
Uh,
what that means is, I don't know what the timeline is, but I don't think it could be stopped.
right. So we're very clear that like we don't think it. I don't think there'll be a revival. Um, if we can't get out, just finding some place that won't be burned down in the riots, is your next best thing. Um, Christopher Cordum says Brian's hit a bit on that when he talks about the bank and the investment algorithms black box. Yep. Like I said, I'm not a trained economist. I failed an economics course. Can't do it. Bradford Walker can't self exile. What a pity. Uh, but the thing is that it's not about security or anything like that. It's about me getting up and saying I will preserve what I can. if I find a family in a home where I'm going, I'm going to take all the art I own, all the pieces that make me me, and preserve as much of it as possible. And I will try to open up paths for other similar Americans to come over to join me. And we're not going to do it just because of some sort of honor or anything like that. I'm doing it to preserve the fire. And I am an exiled American. I am not whatever country I land in. And that is a very important distinction. My children will be trained to be Americans, and I will pass on what I can to them. Whether if they accept it or not, will be up to them. But I will have the fire. I will offer it to them. They will have the opportunity to take it, which is more important than anything else. Whatever's going to happen is that we're going to experience bad times, and then we're going to experience good times. But we might not see those good times until we're dead. Gaius Marius, who did the Legion and all this other stuff, the Century and so on. No, not the Century. I can't remember what he did, but he reformed the Marian reforms. He reformed the Roman military. He basically fought all his life. He never saw peace, and then he died in a civil war. And Sulla did basically the same thing, and Caesar basically did the same thing, and Mark Antony did the same thing. And Octavian was the one who finally saw some peace. We have like 5 generations from the Second Punic War to the Third Punic War, we'll say Second to Third Punic War, to Augustus's reign, where there was basically war forever, civil war, famine, blight. Soldiers were given fields that they didn't know how to till, and so it caused famine. It just keeps going and going and going. Self exile is the answer I have, but I do it for specific reasons. And honestly, I don't know if I could fight. I like to follow a lot of like eco warrior things where it's like dudes in the Idaho forests, and I love their memes because they just don't care. But at the same time, they're larping. You know, their only option against like things like the ATF would be to run. This, that, or the other thing. Listen, there's no point in dying a hero. What benefit is there to be the next John Brown? They've hung Ben Wheeler's body on a sour apple tree, and I'm hanging there enjoying the irony because my dad grows apple trees. It's a sick culture. It's a sick experience, and there's no unifying spirit to it. If John C. Wright is correct, which I do not believe he is, then we would see a Christian revival. But that is the only circumstance. It's not beyond God. It's not beyond God, but it would be an explicit miracle. Because people aren't going to turn to God. People still argue with the pastor over how the lawn should be, or how the decrepit, how should this look or that look. They're more concerned with the outward than the inward. I talk to the pastor and I go, hey, this, that, and the other thing, and we share a good laugh because I expect nothing from the pastor except that he be the pastor. What? Is
That is April and her baby. Hello, April.
Hi.
Hello.
Didn't
Sorry,
realize
our
the
topic
microphone
today
picked
is
that up.
our topic today is kind of depressing.
I jumped on because I heard you guys talking about like I don't know, investment in like preserving like the stories that I like. Is that I think I heard Ben saying something about like wanting to hang on to certain things for like preservation reasons.
So, have either of you read A Canticle for Leibowitz? I've mentioned it to Ben a few times.
Don't think so.
Nope.
So, A Canticle for Leibowitz, I recommend it probably at least once every couple of weeks because it's a fantastic book by Walter M. Miller. A Canticle for
I thought
Leibowitz.
you meant like reading it every couple weeks.
No, it's not that short. But a Canticle for Leibowitz, I recommend probably once every couple of weeks or so, and it's by Walter M. Miller. It's a very strange book in the sense that it was written in I think the '60s, and it was a science fiction novel. It won the Hugo and everything. Walter M. Miller was a Catholic, but somehow this book just apparently was so good that it kind of broke through the you know atheistic, naturalistic crust that generally surrounds the awards, and the critical consensus of the genre, even at the time, so that it became a classic. The reason that I bring it up is because the premise of A Canticle for Leibowitz is this. There is some sort of disaster implied to be nuclear apocalyptic, and a man who becomes known as who becomes known later as Saint Leibowitz, a Jewish convert to Catholicism, decides to start a monastery where the role of the monks is to preserve all of the knowledge of the pre-apocalypse world. And the book is not actually about Leibowitz, who is only mentioned as as the founder of the order. It is about the monks of the Abbey of St. Leibowitz as they preserve knowledge, and it's really three different books that are bound together in one. The first book is about a young monk who sees a vision of St. Leibowitz at the Abbey, and because at the time he was only Blessed Leibowitz, and they were like looking for a final miracle to canonize him. So he's interviewed by members of the Vatican about what he saw, and that's just the first book. It's considered one of the best books, but I personally find the story in it the least interesting. But people really loved it, so I don't know. I'm the weird one there. The second book takes place several hundred years in the future. Society has grown a lot from the first book, and in the second book, it follows the current abbot of the monk of the now Saint Leibowitz, and they're getting visited by a man who is an atheist and is known to be like a Leonardo da Vinci type, a real Renaissance man and a scientist. And when he shows up he's embarrassed when a monk who is known to be just kind of a tinkerer manages to get a light bulb working before he does. So that whole book is absolutely fantastic, and it has the stunning climactic moment where Abbott takes down a light bulb and puts up a crucifix, which always struck me as a scene that would never be praised in modern fiction. Normally, it's all about taking down the superstitions and bringing up the science. But no, the climax of the book is that he regrets having taken down the crucifix to make room for the light bulb. And he goes back to putting the crucifix up. And the third book is the most amazing one of all. In the third book, which takes place several hundred years past that point, the main character from the first book is now a skull in the Abbey, and I believe he became a blessed. He's mentioned in passing. Now there is another nuclear war that is about to break out. The church is allowing doctors to use their grounds to treat people who have radiation sickness under the one condition that they are not allowed to euthanize anybody while they are using the grounds. But a doctor breaks the rule and euthanizes a dying person, and they're all kicked out. And the book is about the monk when he meets a mother who left his abbey and has a dying baby, and he has to try and convince her not to euthanize her dying baby. And it's an absolutely harrowing book, as you can imagine. Really, really frightening stuff. But I always considered it an incredibly brave book because whenever I think of discussions about euthanasia, I always thought that people kind of tried to tap dance around the subject a little bit. People will go, well, sometimes people recover, or there are always ways to mitigate pain. And here's Walter M. Miller in A Canticle for Leibowitz saying, well, you're not going to recover, and there's no way to mitigate the pain. And it's an infant who doesn't have the capacity to choose for themselves, but euthanasia is still wrong, and you still shouldn't do it. And I always thought that was an incredibly brave position for Walter M. Miller to take. So I bring this up in terms of the current conversation because the book is all about the preservation of knowledge for future societies, and in this case, the starting of a religious order specifically dedicated to doing that. I do wonder if it wouldn't be a bad idea to do a project like that, specifically with digital copies of things. Uh, like, if we have all of these digital works and things, I wonder if it's not a bad idea to create some sort of like de-digitalization project. Some
Yeah.
way of protecting all of this stuff. I don't know how to start it or when to start it or who to start it with, but it's, evidently somebody thought it was a good idea in the past and turned it into an excellent book. And I feel like that might be something that should be important. Similarly, Nick Cole has an amazing, amazing scene in his otherwise okay, I think, book, The Dark Knight. Uh, which is about it's another post-apocalyptic story. This time it's about a slow child who is out on his own. And to make a long story short and skip out a large part of the book, he somehow made his way to like one of the last libraries in the country. All of the libraries have been destroyed, and the military has been tasked with protecting this library at all costs. And now like monsters are swarming the library. And they have this absolutely beautiful scene in the book where the soldier who's been tasked with protecting the library and now is kind of looking after this boy just because he showed up there, he sends him off and he realizes he has a choice that he can protect the library or he could but it would mean that the slow child is going to die, or he can protect the slow child, but in that case, the library, which contains possibly the last of humanity's knowledge, is going to be destroyed. And that's his whole mission, is to protect the library. And the slow child just kind of wandered in. And in this beautiful moment, the soldier realizes that if he decides to protect the library, there will be no reason for the library to exist anyway, because they'll have lost anything that even makes them human by letting a helpless, by letting an innocent, helpless person die, because that they'll have lost any reason for them to have that knowledge in the first place. So he chooses to rescue the child. And once again, just made me think of this because we're talking about preserving knowledge for the future. And there's also this idea that we need to remember what makes us human as well. With that said, I do wonder if it isn't about time, and I know that Vox Day is kind of trying to make strides with, but I'm not talking so much about what Vox Day is doing, about getting classic works of literature and getting them in hardcover. I'm talking about, like, we have all of our pulp friends and things and people who are making these works, and they're going to be lost forever if
Yep.
somebody doesn't make them hardcover, if somebody doesn't make physical copies. Pinkerton's Ghosts, at the moment, if the internet were to shut down right now, never to return, Pinkerton's Ghosts would be lost forever. We would be it would live on in the memories of those who heard it and nothing and nowhere else.
Yep.
It's probably a good idea to get some sort of physical copy of Pinkerton's Ghosts out there and things like that. But I really don't know how to go about it.
There will be some work going into that I will be doing, but ooh, fantastic. Uh, Ken has just told me that we might get a female guest star. Oh, anyway, I'm messing around.
Girls on the internet bringing numbers.
They do. So
April, we were just talking about how we've been getting we were just talking about how we were doing way better on the live streams lately, and
oh, it hurts.
I wonder if it's because you went on. Legitimately, I'm only thinking of this now. Like, this only occurred to me now, but like, girl on the internet might attract views.
So
I see.
yes.
I mean, I'm just sitting here like, I guess I have something to add of just, I agree with you guys. Like, husband and I, there's certain things that we try to get in like hard copy, like a physical copy, because we want to make sure we have, I think he refers to it as like preserving like the good parts of like Western culture, or like what we want to be able to pass down, because you never know what's going to get, censored or altered, or just not have access to it. So we've definitely over time been like getting building a good library for our children.
Yep, and that's one of the things I'm working on for myself. But I want to go back here for like to sort of hammer in the euthanasia point. The destruction of human lives, casually, has always been the ultimate goal of demonkind. They want death and they want people to stay out of heaven. Quite frankly, I'm surprised that we haven't had death sport in yet. Um, you know, like the Romans did. But then again, who knows what we'll
That's
see?
the vestiges of Christian civilization there.
Yep. So when that leaves and we start having death sport, like that's how it will go. Um, will it go everywhere? No, there will be some places that fight back and stuff like that. Missouri has basically defunded Planned Parenthood from a state level, and other things like that. But it is something that will devolve into entertainment if it is not fought. And I don't just mean, oh, well, what about this? It's abortion is wrong in all circumstances. Euthanasia is wrong in all circumstances. We have the ability to make euthanasia widespread entertainment, and I guarantee you people will go for it. You know,
Hmm.
you already have digital versions of it, we already have all these different things. It'll happen.
Well, it's
Um,
always been one of the reasons I so admired A Canticle for Leibowitz, because I never really liked a lot of what I heard of people talking about euthanasia, because I always felt like people kind of were dodging the question a little bit. People would talk about euthanasia and would go, oh, well, people might get better. There are other more humane ways to do things or whatever. And I'm like, yes, yes, that's true. You're not wrong, but, I get their point. Like, what if there isn't? What if it would be, you are saving people pain? Or what if it really is the most moral way to do? And I know people where
People
this
are too
has
scared.
been the case.
People are too scared
And
of
that's
pain when it can be a sanctifying experience.
yes, that's true. But
All right,
that's
I'm
why
gonna
I
have to
really
go. I'm gonna have to
appreciated.
go. On this dreary subject here, have some baby laughs.
There you go.
okay.
Cheer
All right,
everybody up.
see you guys.
Mm-hmm.
I might hang out and chat. He's just yeah, he's not. He's got my microphone. Yeah, what's up? All right, bye.
Right. Yep. We got
Ladies and gentlemen, A.M. Freeman, author.
right. It's you know going on. I think the goal of superversives and superversive aligned people, pulp rev and so on and so forth, should be preservation above a lot of stuff. Some people are definitely warriors, but honestly, like every most of the superversives in pulp I've met, even the ones who write military fiction, tend to be scholars. Let us do our duty before God Almighty and preserve what we can, no matter the cost to us. Um, when I establish myself wherever I'm going, I will be doing this. I hope that with your future dreams that we can align each other together on this stuff. But honestly, I'm gonna do it whether or not I'm just some crazy white dude in a Southeast Asian country who has an immense library. Uh, it doesn't matter how it is, or maybe if it doesn't even come to anything, we have to do it. We have to make sure that the dark age is as short as possible. um, there's a lot of stuff out here, that we can do that's pretty simple. um, Buying physical copies. If you go to abebooks.com, you can buy an old book for like $5. I've got books I've spent hundreds of dollars on.
Yeah.
Even though I'm in financial straits, I still pay for some book stuff just to make sure that I get them. And I don't do it just because oh, it makes me feel good to have a rare book in my thing. I do it because I have no idea if this will survive to the future. Um, and I believe that God will provide for it and provide for me. Crazy white boy library, absolutely. Start learning how to bind books. It's one of the things I want to do with myself once I'm more established. Learn how to bind
Well,
books.
maybe I'll do that. Start like a Saint Leibowitz, society of Saint Leibowitz. Not, just of people who are interested in preserving our the physical heritage of our books. And in this case, though, it would be a little bit different than what Vox is doing, which is about preserving like the important books of Western civilization and the ancient books and things like that physically. Rather, it would be about people who have, ebooks and internet only books who might want to make physical versions of those books
Yep.
and preserving them somewhere. So, if anybody is interested, maybe I'll make that a project for the long term, though. Taking on another project is probably a bad idea right now since I'm doing Pinkerton's Ghosts and I also am working. And I'm also not Ben, who likes taking on projects like Candy. But
Delicious workaholism.
yes. But with that said, this is a worthy project, so do like a Leibowitz Society. And the long term goal here would be to turn it into an actual physical like library with a location. People send their books there if they have ebooks or whatever that they want to preserve. Only, of course, we would have morality and decency standards, so if you have porn, it's out.
Yep. We don't need to preserve Mist of Avalon and other things.
It's going to be on the website. Like, we are a benevolent dictatorship here. As such, if we don't want your book, then we won't take it. We are not promising to do this with every book. We are doing it with the books that we think are worth preserving for some reason. So, which is important because if you have anything but a benevolent dictatorship, it will get converged.
Yep.
And no, if we do this, it would be known as it would probably get known fairly quickly if it got big in any way, shape, or form as some sort of militant right-wing organization. Now, obviously, it would not be, but that doesn't matter if it actually was or not.
Right.
It's the reputation would become pretty quickly.
Right, and it's something that's cross purposes. I haven't heard of Mystery Grove products. Send me a link on that, Megabuster Shepherd, through Twitter. You know who I am, baby. Christopher Cottom says, when I become the Baron of Idaho, there's going to be a monastery and library initiatives to make as a broad-based backup as possible. Keep digital and printed copies, have modern and moving block printers. Here's the thing. If something goes on, my skill set is actually archive and preservation. As well as creation of books and formatting them and printing them. I don't know how to bind books yet, but I can do basically everything up to the point where I need to cure the leather. I was trained as an archive in school, and I still remember how to do it. I even comment on it on one of the later Pinkerton Ghosts episode. The fact of the matter is, I'm willing to preserve it, and I put my money where my mouth is. I have a library, my family has a library, and I've told them very clearly for them not to get rid of books that we don't have doubles of or aren't like the fifth Nazarene hymn book that we don't need because it has the same songs in it. But even then, honestly, we should just keep it.
The Hillsong songbook.
Right. Even though we shouldn't treat it seriously, we should keep it in archive.
So I'll have to put this out if anybody is interested in joining like the the Leibowitz Society. I wouldn't call it Saint Leibowitz because then people might think there was an actual Saint Leibowitz, and they're not. It's a fictional character in a sci-fi novel.
Maybe there was a holy man called Leibowitz. Come on.
I mean, there probably was at one point, but no. So it'll be, but I would make like the Leibowitz Society, and if anybody who's interested, and the idea would be that we, find indie books that would otherwise not be preserved that we believe are worth preserving and make physical copies. And the long-term goal would be to eventually like rent out a building and have a physical library of otherwise internet-only books.
Yep. We would have to figure out some things about that because funding would have to be carefully managed.
Oh yeah. When I say long-term goal, I mean 20 to 30 year long-term goal.
Yep. There's honestly at this point, I've got Combat Frame Exceed, I've got a lot of material, but I don't have, like a lot of I've got some copies of the Rachel Griffin books. I've got basically every John C. Wright book, except for his fantasy series.
So I did possibly the tackiest thing I could possibly do, and to this day I feel bad about it. When I met John C. Wright and Chachi, the book that I brought with me for John to sign, I got used off of Amazon, and it was a former library book, and the library binding was still on it.
Don't worry,
And
St.
he signed
Lubricants
that
will
book.
pray for you.
And I only thought of this later. I'm like, oh my god, that is a very obviously used library book. So he knows I did not pay him actual money for this book.
You can buy him
I
lunch.
paid a third-party seller for this book. I also own a book that is signed by the author and dedicated to Newt Gingrich.
Ooh.
I got it off Amazon, and when I opened it up, it was dedicated to Newt Gingrich, which raises so many questions. Like, Newt Gingrich apparently sold his book on Amazon.
So the funny
Was hurting for money.
right? For cheap
Like,
too. Like we put that in the center
for
plinth,
cheap.
and it's just on there, and it's illuminating Newt Gingrich's signature.
So this was in college, and it was a textbook that I had, and it was written by a man who had somehow managed to graduate college and even become an English teacher while never learning how to read. And that was what the book was about. And in the cover, it was it was signed by the author, and it was dedicated to Newt Gingrich as a thank you for like supporting literacy or something. Who knows? But it was like, thank you for supporting literacy to Newt Gingrich, and signed by the author. So I had Newt Gingrich's copy signed by the author. That Newt Gingrich apparently found the book so boring that he sold it on Amazon for cheap. And I ended up with it.
Right. So, we're not gonna dedicate ourselves to anything that we're not already doing for now. But this is something that we need to seriously consider. It's not about the logic of it.
Freeman says you gotta let that go, Anthony. No, that's extremely funny. I'm not letting it go. It raises so many questions.
Yep. Next week I'm hoping. So I'm gonna.
I'm glad you're on my side here. You're like, no, this is important.
It is.
Or maybe
Shepherd
he
says
died.
is
That's
linking books to me.
maybe Newt Gingrich is dead.
There we go. I'll have to look through these things in time. Is he dead? I don't think Newt Gingrich is dead.
No, he's not dead.
So, like, we have to close up because I got stuff to do in about an hour. But, this is something to consider. If it's in your hands to preserve something, preserve it. It's not about the logic. It's not about the rationality. It's to prevent or shorten a dark age that's coming. There's something in the dark, I can't remember. Anyway, I can't remember MGMT's Little Dark Age. But basically it's we're small people. We're scholars, we're people, maybe a few of us have been soldiers in the listener section, I don't know. But the point is that we have to do our duty. And if we can preserve what we can, hey, if we do it for God, we're doing it for the right reasons. We should not lose good Christian literature, specifically good Christian literature. The Left Behind series are off the arc. Prevent it from being destroyed. Actually, there's probably enough copies of the Left Behind series to survive any dark age, so I'm not worried about them.
Ironically, the Left Behind series will survive the Rapture.
And with that, I am leading us away. We're going into a tunnel. We're leaving. Goodbye. Little Dark Age is a great song.
Are we off?